come from you.
Hi, welcome to Your Next Door Neighbor, where we find out that all our neighbors, and all your neighbors too, have a story. And those stories can be deep and interesting and not what you would expect at all. This week we have
Darnella Ford, who is a customer of mine at my restaurant, Hugo's. She's the most positive person that comes in there on a daily basis. And when we sat down to talk to her, we didn't know the whole dark story behind.
I'm not sure I would call it dark. I would say it was trying. Everybody has a life, and you never know where it is that they come from. And we like to investigate that, and we like to share that with you, and everybody on the show likes to share that with you.
Right. And so she went from this place to another place, which she did through the study of
quantum physics.
Quantum physics.
Tied up with
spirituality. And then she ended up starting an organization called
Journey to Worthy.
And she works with groups of people and also
gives a great deal of her time and her life to people that you wouldn't think deserve it.
Yeah.
Prisoners.
So we hope you enjoy this episode.
My name is Darnella Ford, and I was born in Clifton, Illinois.
And where is Clifton, Illinois?
Clifton, Illinois is...
We should start with Illinois.
Yeah. Clifton, Illinois is... That's a very good question. I want to say it's south of Chicago. My mother was born in Chicago, so I know it's somewhere in that part of the world. I never lived in Clifton. I was only born there, which is an interesting thing. I lived 9 years in a little place called St. Ann Woods. So I lived like in the woods, literally for 9 years.
Illinois?
In Illinois, in the woods, in a very small little town. And we moved to Phoenix, Arizona when I was 9 years old. And I grew up in Phoenix, Valley of the Sun. So I ended up growing up in Phoenix, which was a culture shock because at that time we moved to North Phoenix and we were the second black family in the whole area. So the neighbors, the locals, were not accustomed to seeing someone like me. So I actually grew up with a very interesting complex about the color of my skin, because this was the era of Farrah Fawcett, Cheryl Tiegs, Charlie's Angels, and then here I was, this little brown girl with this afro, this out of control mane, trying to fit in. So that was my upbringing.
And why did your parents move there?
They wanted a better life. It was difficult in the place that we lived. It was a repressed area, economically repressed, and my mother moved us there for opportunity to have a better life.
And what did your parents do for work?
My mother was a nurse, and she still actually is practicing, and my father was a truck driver. He was in the Teamsters. So
Local, or did he go across country?
Local. He never wanted to do long haul. So yeah, he was a local driver.
He wanted to stay at home.
He wanted to stay at home.
Get home for his family every night.
Yeah, I mean, the area that we lived in, we lived to the far north, as far as they had developed. But of course, they've gone way beyond that now. It was a very, I appreciate it now because it was simple. It was smaller versus Los Angeles. It wasn't congested. It was the things that I appreciated about it now were the things I had no point of comparison to. I didn't know busy, chaotic city. So for me, it was a challenge because, again, no one looked like me. I always felt like odd man out. There was a culture shock just because when I lived in Illinois in the backwoods, everybody, their skin looked like mine. And when I went, no one looked like me. And it was very difficult to understand the difference in the environment. And people weren't always so kind. So the N word was thrown around a lot because we were an anomaly in the neighborhood. And not everyone was kind. So I met a lot of that in the 80s in Phoenix. It felt to be a very racially divided time because we were brand new. I remember going into a store once and a little kid coming up to me and saying, "Mommy, this lady's made out of chocolate." And you could just tell when you walked into a room and there were individuals who weren't accustomed to seeing people that looked like me. Just you get that stare. It's just a little bit longer than a normal stare. And you see that they're just trying to process you, what you look like, what your hair texture is like, people wanting to feel my hair, So I grew up often feeling out of the box. I felt very much out, which we compensate. So how did I compensate? I tried to be funny, charming. I became an actress in the theater. I was doing a lot of dramatic the plays, and I wanted to be accepted by the masses. So popularity, which is a big deal for young people, but it really became like my end-all be-all. I wanted to be very popular. I wanted to be loved. I wanted to be accepted. So.
And did that ever happen when you were in high school?
I mean, I did. I think so. I mean, I definitely felt like I attracted a lot of people into my experience who just thought I was funny and cool and that fun girl. But I wanted to be the pretty girl. And that never quite happened. I had glasses. They broke. We couldn't afford to fix them. I had duct tape on them. It just was a hot mess. You ever heard of a Jerry curl? I had a Jerry curl. Yeah, I had one of those. Yeah, not so pretty, but.
So you graduated high school. Did you go to college?
I did. I transferred to a 2-year junior college, and then I transferred to University of Arizona for a period of time. I studied foreign languages and journalism. I got a job at a newspaper, and I did a journalism internship for 5 years. So I started interviewing people. I started writing columns and news stories and features. I fell in love with the lyrical word. And journalism was an interesting art because it was about writing tight. You know, we had to fit everything in this inch column. And I lost my affection for it because I wanted to be a little bit more creative. I wanted to be able to write as long as I wanted to go without all the boundaries. So that's why I turned to writing novels. But it was an interesting upbringing in that way.
How old were you when you started?
I was 16 years old when I started working at the newspaper. Always wanted to be a writer, felt a life calling to it. So I started as a data entry clerk. And I would sit beside this old editor who was on staff, George Chrisman. He was the typical with the greased back hair, the high waters, suspenders. And he would teach me about editing and teach me how to write tight and the importance of it. And I worked alongside of him for years. I was just a nosy, interested. And then one day he gave me a story and said, hey, how about you write this story? And I was like, oh my God, he's giving me a story. And I did it. And he said, I was 18. And he said, wow, this is really good. And so they gave me another story. And pretty soon I was getting regular assignments from the editors because they needed writers to fill in for some of the data and some of the newspaper articles. And so I was going out, I had my little camera, I was going out interviewing people. It was really a very beautiful experience to be able to have that at such a young age and go interview some of these old, like Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey. I interviewed some of the old trapeze artists. I interviewed neuroscientist. I interviewed a doctor that was working on a cure for Alzheimer's. This is back in the 80s. I was a kid and in some very big grown-up situations. It was amazing.
And was it mostly features? It wasn't hard news. It was mostly features.
It was mostly features, yeah. I didn't do the hard stuff. I started doing features because I loved, that gave me more creativity. I could do more creative writing with the features.
So you were in college and working at the newspaper.
Mm-hmm. Working part-time. I was in school full-time and I was working part-time at the paper. My major was journalism and then I switched to foreign languages because I'd studied Spanish for 5 years. So I moved in with a family that didn't speak any English from El Salvador so that I could learn the language fluently because I also considered being a translator for the juvenile court system. I was all over the place. I was going to be a translator. I was going to speak Spanish. I was going to be an editor. I was going to be a journalist and a novelist. I was
big dreams.
Always a dreamer, always. And I was 19 years old, working at the paper. I heard Oprah Winfrey was coming to town, and she was my model for success. So they had a lottery system. You could only go see her speaking at this event she was speaking at if you won a lottery. So I sent in my name and self-addressed stamped envelope, and if they picked you out of the lottery, they'd send you tickets. Well, I didn't believe that was going to work, so I said, you know what, we can't rely on that. I need to get ABC on the line and get somebody on the line and let them know that I'm important. And I thought, well, they won't really, a little college kid that's working part-time at the paper. So I said, this is Darnella Ford. I am an executive with Ebony Magazine. And I told him I was an executive with Ebony. And I had been on staff in Chicago, and I lived in Arizona and in Chicago. And they sent me VIP press pass to get into the Oprah, to see Oprah speak in Sun City West at the Gamage Auditorium. The Sun City West Sundome was where she was speaking. And sure enough, I got my VIP pass, and I won the lottery. I had 4 tickets. I was the only person in town. So I took my best friend. She went with me. And then the 2 tickets I gave to my mother, who said to me, oh, you'll never win that lottery to see Oprah. It'll never happen. So on the day that they arrived, I already had my 2 VIP passes for Ebony magazine, press credentials and all.
Did you run into anybody from magazine?
No, thank goodness. Oh my God, thank goodness. No, but I gave my mother the tickets. I told her, Mother, you must always believe. You must always believe. I gave her the 2 tickets. I said, but you sitting in the balcony, I'm going to be up in the front with the VIP. And that's what happened.
So did you get to meet Oprah?
I did. Shook her hand. That was like a huge moment. Just, she was walking by in a crowd. People were standing shaking her hand, and I got a chance to touch her hand. She represented greatness to me.
Yeah.
And in the 80s, she was, I didn't know any successful Black women at that level. She represented possibility. So she was my dream for many years. She was my dream because she represented the excellence that I wanted to aspire to in my life.
Wow.
Yeah, and I always loved her, and I always had this thing. But it's very interesting. I was obsessed with being on the Oprah show. So when I started writing books, I began writing novels. When my first novel was published, I knew Oprah was going to call me. I went out, I bought an outfit. I had my outfit hanging up in my closet. I knew that American Airlines was the official carrier of the Oprah Winfrey Show. I knew that every guest stayed at the Omni Hotel. I had it all planned. I had my room in the Omni. I had my flight picked out in American Airlines. I had my outfit, and she never called. I couldn't understand, why did Oprah not call me about my books, My dream for many, many, many years was to sit down with her and dialogue with her about my work. And I soon, later in life, came to understand that my attachment to her, and I believe this is probably true for a lot of people, when they look at Oprah and they look at people who are successful, they see worth. And if you feel that you don't have worth, you ascribe that to something outside of yourself, and you want to touch it and be connected to it so you could be worthy. So my obsession with Oprah really had much less to do about Oprah and everything to do about my sense of feeling worthless. Mm-hmm. So I now know that. So now I have her in a much more balanced frame in my point of reference.
So you finished college. You're working at the newspaper still.
Yes.
But shortly after that, you move on.
I fell in love with the FedEx man. He said, I'm moving to LA. And I said, well, I got to go with you. And there we go. I ended up here in LA with the FedEx man.
What year was that?
It was 1989. He was 14 years older than me. I was 21. He was 14 years older than me. He had been married twice and had 3 children. And that was my first boyfriend I ever had.
And he's the FedEx man.
He was the FedEx man. This is all we know. And when I moved here and I spent time with him, I learned obviously a lot more. We moved in together. Lord have mercy.
And he became the X-Man instead.
Oh my God. That was a 5-year journey. Honestly, I learned it's my first boyfriend. I had no basis for a criteria for choosing a partner. So needless to say, it was an utter disaster. And I ended up in a very emotionally and physically abusive relationship for 5 years. And scared because I didn't know anyone here. It was a very challenging time. My self-esteem was really low. And I was under the mind control of this individual who was, again, 14 years my senior. I was very young and impressionable and naive. And he was very seasoned. And it was a very dark time, but it taught me so much about relationships, partners, the people that we attract, why we attract them. And it helped me to develop the courage, which set in motion the next part of my life.
You're in this relationship, and towards the end, you're realizing that you need to get out of this relationship.
Oh, I'm realizing it in the beginning.
Okay, so what was
the impetus?
Yeah.
What is it saying? Nothing helps you get over an old love like a new love. So I met someone else.
I think I missed that scene.
Yeah, it was nothing noble. It wasn't that I had some great moment of realizing my self-worth. I met another man that I was attracted to, and he was nice to me. So I lost all affection, which was bleeding out by the moment for this old boyfriend, and I just became obsessed with the new guy.
And you were living in Los Angeles.
I was living in Sherman Oaks. I realized that the relationship was over But oftentimes we realize something is over long before we're actually able to take action on it. So I was going through the motions. I was just in one of these difficult relationships like many people are now. And you're there because it's convenient, because you share a home and you share a refrigerator and you share rent. And a lot of times you form partnerships with people, and once you become financially locked, then you're just in it. So me being no different, I was in it, but I wasn't in it in my heart. And I started seeing someone else. And that was very messy, because I had met this man through a woman who was at one time one of my dearest friends. So it was my best friend's boyfriend, and it was very ugly. It was a very, very dramatic soap opera unfolding. I was very drawn to him, and we ended up having this torrid love affair. And none of it ended pretty. I ended up leaving the first guy and hanging out with the second guy on and off in this love triangle that lasted for 2 years.
And did everybody know about each other?
Yes, and it was terrible. The police was called. It was drama. My house was tore apart. The guys got into a fight. The girl came and tore up my house. It was it was a very difficult time. But that story has a beautiful ending, though.
Which is?
2008. After growing up and undertaking my own unique spiritual path, I realized one day that we are the essence of everything that we do to other people. And I realized that even though I was in my early 20s, this girl was my best friend at one time. We were best friends. And I betrayed her. And I realized the ramifications of that, what that would cost her in ever trusting anyone ever again. So I thank God for Facebook. I found her on Facebook in 2008. I sat down one night and I just wrote her a very long letter. She was living in Hawaii. And she's remarried. And I wrote her a letter, and I just really acknowledged her and what I had done and the long range effect of my behavior on her life and her heart. And I apologized from the sincerest place that I knew how to. I didn't expect her to respond. I wrote it and I sent it, and within 30 minutes she replied and said that and we hadn't communicated in 17 years. And she thanked me for writing her and said that put her heart at peace. And we began a dialogue. And she was married to this beautiful man. And they began to have problems. And she knew about the transformational healing work that I had begun doing. And she reached out to me for help. And she came back to LA for a brief period of time. And I hadn't seen her again in almost 20 years. And one night she knocked on my door to come for a healing session. Full circle.
And she didn't call you and arrange an appointment. She just knocked on your door.
She did. She said, I need help. I made an appointment with her. I didn't know for sure that she would come. It was a Friday night at 9 o'clock, and she knocked on my door, and there she stood. The last time we saw each other, she was threatening to kill me. Wow. And we had gotten into fist fights, and I mean, just it was horrific. Death threats. She tried to drive me off the freeway one night going 100 miles an hour. I mean, we had a real, I'm going to take you out for stealing my man. I mean, she sent me to the hospital one night. She came up on me in my car and I didn't know it, and she jabbed something in my eye and I lost the vision in my eye for 3 days. I mean, we had a real, very violent relationship.
So you go from not going out with anybody to the other end of the spectrum.
Yeah, it was. It was unbelievable. And I mean, I met this girl. We were working downtown in an office together, and we were really good friends. She was the reason I used to live in the South Bay, that I moved to the Valley. We were very close. We're like sisters. You know, when you're young, you meet friends, you're excited. And then I saw her boyfriend, and then all bets were off. And they'd been together for 7 years. They were in a long-term relationship. And he and I just began this. And we used to go out as a couple, like me and my boyfriend and them. You know, we were like couples. We go to dinner, we go to movies, we go to concerts. And he and I had this energy that we should have never crossed the line, but we did, you know?
And where did that energy go to?
Into the bedroom, and that's where all the trouble started. Really, I mean, we began this affair. We could not, you have this moment where you can, attraction is just energy, right? So attraction is normal, it's natural, but you always get to decide whether you act upon the attraction. People who are wise and know that that probably is not going to be the best for everybody involved, they'll stop before it gets too far. But then others will indulge and will push it to the edge because they're selfish, because they are greedy, because they're lustful, or because they're needy, or because they're wounded, because they want to feel loved, right? For whatever reason, we had one conversation that tipped the whole thing. And he said
But do you think you might have been attracted to the negative outcome that you obviously knew was coming from this relationship?
I was in my early 20s, so allow me to be shallow for a moment. And my cat will collaborate my shallow
commentary.
Yeah, the man that I was with, again, was much older than me. He had a belly. He was a middle-aged man. And I was really young at the time. And this guy was at the gym. He had a six-pack. I mean, we're just talking shallow. And he was brilliant, though. He went to UCLA Law School. He had a brilliant mind. He felt like me. He was so different. Sometimes we're just drawn to different, just because it's nothing that we've ever had before. He was so different. And I wanted to feel different. And he said one thing to me. I called one night from my friend. He picked up the phone. This is how the whole thing started. Simple conversation. He made a comment that if we might talk ourselves out of something that could be potentially beautiful. And I was like, what do you mean? And he shared he had feelings for me. And he was beautiful to me. I had feelings for him. And he said, let's not talk ourselves out of what could be. And that was it. That was the line. Let us not talk ourselves out of what could be. And the next thing you know, a lot. And there probably is a rush, the forbidden aspect of it. And the allure, the excitement of meeting in the back of grocery stores and alleys and parking lots. And, we trying to find a place so that we could act out our passions. It wasn't easy, but it was on and off. And then at one point he moved out of her house and he moved into mine. And we were living together. But they were still connected because they were dysfunctional and codependent and they could never separate. So she was always there. And it was weird. We went from the very best of friends to the most bitter of enemies. I mean, completely opposite. The reason I stopped 2.5 years later, and I'll tell you why. My sister called me one day, my older sister, 18 months older than me. And she said, if you keep messing with this man, because I was so dysfunctional, I couldn't go, I was losing jobs, I couldn't get to work. There was always so much drama going on. It was consuming me. And my sister said to me, if you keep on with this, one day she is going to kill you. She's going to kill you. You're going to die if you stay in this. And in her words, I felt this eerie sense of prophetic truth. And that's when I stopped. I said, if I stay in this, it's going to cost me my life.
You're with him for 2.5 more years. Mm-hmm. At some point that ends. Mm-hmm. How does that end? Your sister tells you...
My sister tells me I'm going to die. And the negative consequences, I had lost so much weight that I was almost unrecognizable to myself. I'd stopped eating. I couldn't keep a job. I was in the bed more than I was out of the bed. And not just to have fun, but because I was too depressed to go to work. I was lying to everybody. It was nothing less than, it was nothing if you looked at a person with a heroin habit. It cost me no less. It cost me my job, it cost me money, it cost me relationships, it cost me friends, it cost me my health. I went from I was normally a size 7 to a size 0. I began to layer my clothes because I had stopped eating. I was going to see a psychiatrist. He was giving me antidepressants. I was on pills to wake up, to go to sleep, to come down, to eat. I just medicated to the hilt just to function.
So what broke the cycle?
Yeah. And what point did you figure you were on a journey that you needed to look at?
Because I knew at some point, and I think I think it was a combination of everything I gave away in 2.5 years till I was left with nothing. And I think you reach a point where you literally say, one more hit and I'm going to die. One more shot in my arm, I'm going to die. one more meeting with this guy is going to take me out. And I think it literally came down to, do you want to live? I was 24 years old. I was a baby. Do you want to live?
The answer was yes.
The answer was yes. And it was very hard. And it was...
And what did you do? What actions did you take?
I met a new love. But it wasn't a love. It was just someone in the meantime. This particular in the meantime person became the father of my daughter. He was boring. I went the exact opposite way. He was an engineer. He was boring. He wasn't exciting. I wasn't really attracted to him. I just wanted someone who was stable. I had been on a 2.5-year roller coaster, like fireworks and gun explosions and hand grenades. You know, it'd been like I was in Iraq. I was in a battle. And I just wanted to be in the farmlands of Kansas. And this was the farmlands of Kansas, this very boring man who didn't really stimulate me in any way. And I wanted to be understimulated so that I could balance myself out. I started going out with this guy, and we dated, we just had Friday night dates. It was nothing serious. And then I got pregnant with my daughter. And that was the turnaround of my life. That was the turnaround.
To what direction? What happened?
To, I just had to stop everything. Got 2 jobs, worked 2 jobs until I was 8.5 months pregnant. He was very angry, didn't want anything to do with me while I was pregnant. But he did come when my daughter was when I was in the hospital giving birth to her. He felt inspired to come up to the hospital. The day she was born, he became a part of her life, and has maintained that for 22 years.
He has.
He has. Okay. She's a daddy's girl. She loves her dad. He loves her. I think that, you know, her father went into kidney failure when she was 9 years old. And as much as it's very interesting, because he did not want to have a child because he was dating someone back east, a banker. And he was first generation African-American in his family that had gone to college. And he was that guy that the whole family had hopes. And he was in more of an alliance, you know, him and the banker. And they made a good story together. And then here I was, this wild chick that was just... I was never the one anybody was supposed to know about, and I got pregnant, which really, it showed he wasn't being in integrity, right? And he had skeletons, and he didn't want anybody to know about that. So he was very angry. But you know, my daughter, when she turned 9, he went into kidney failure, and I do believe that my daughter was a positive force in helping him to stay alive. I called him when he called me one day and said, I'm in the kidney failure, my kidneys are gone. And I said, well, listen, whatever it takes, you are not allowed to die because I cannot do this by myself.
You spoke earlier about that you were the only African American in your school in Phoenix. Mm-hmm. So you were an outsider. Mm-hmm. You were the outside person in 2 relationships. You were the person that no one was supposed to know about. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So did that ever dawn on you? Was that something that you were like...
I was always the outsider. I was always on the outside of everything. If everybody was going left, there was that one girl that's going right, and everybody's wondering, what the hell is going, you know, that's me. That's been my whole life. I've never
consciously, or just marched to a different...
I've always marched to a beat of a different drum. I've never seen the world quite the way that others see it. I've always had a very curious mind. I've always challenged everything that was and wondered if it really was true just because everybody said it was true. I've had a love-hate relationship with religion. I always say I left it for good years ago and I gave it up for a better life. And nobody likes to hear that. But, you know, I've always been a seeker. I came here seeking. And I have taken the underground route. Like, I've crawled on my hands and knees to learn about myself, which is why my story that I share with you is so important, because we are a part of everything that we've met. Had I not lived on the outside, meaning doing things and living in a way that maybe some people can't understand, you know, like, oh my God, you slept with your best friend's boyfriend and you had these abusive relationships and you were beat up by men and it's basically the life of an addict. It just, heroin was never my choice of drug. Men was my choice of drug. Men have been no less an addictive drug for me. than heroin is for an addict.
You have your child.
I'm tired.
Does your life start changing now?
My life quiets down because I did not want her to be subject to the dysfunction that I knew before her. Out of love, I said, I'm going to slow down. And what was really interesting is I began to live a double life, meaning I was like the girl next door during the week. And every other weekend, my daughter's father would take her and she would go. And then I became that dysfunctional, the woman on the outside again, because that was always there.
And how did that manifest?
Just
itself?
affairs with married men. This guy, that guy, this guy, that guy, this guy, that guy, this guy. And it was, of course, me. I was always in love. I mean, it was never, everything was great love. I was passionate about all of these people, most of them. Interesting, with the exception of my daughter's father. Isn't that interesting? The one man I was not passionate about with, that's the one I have a child with. Isn't that interesting? All the great passion, the great love.
So how did you overcome this addiction?
Well, the mother of all addictions, I think in 2004, it was a turning point for me because I walked into a restaurant and I met this man. And of course, I gotta say, I was always falling in love. This beautiful green-eyed man. And I met him and somehow we connected, of course, because we always connected because that's just what I did. I was masterful at it, right? And we went on one date, and he moved in on that night. 2.5 years. I was 36, he was 22. He moves into my house, and he became my best friend. And with him, I became a child. And I was an 18-year-old having the high school romance of my life. Isn't that something? The high school romance of my life. Me and this guy, we're traveling, we're going places, to the movies, everything. Of course, all on my dime. Of course, I'm taking care of him. Of course, I'm in another cycle, right? And 2.5 years into this, he says, it's time for me to go. Hollywood is calling my name. He came here to be an actor. The only reason he moved in is he didn't have a place to live. So when he left, it literally broke. That was like the straw that broke the camel's back. That completely broke me. Standing in my bathroom, I looked in the mirror, I fell to my knees, and I said, I have lived my life. I have lived this way all of my life. One to the other, looking for someone to love me, looking for love. I said, please, God, if there is a God, please just don't let me die this way.
How did God answer
that
request of yours?
That was the first, what I would call, I don't know if you call it paranormal experience. In that moment, I literally was transported from the bathroom into a space where there was no space or time. It was complete blackness. And all of a sudden, I just saw a big flicker of light. I just saw the brightest, purest light. And then I was back in the bathroom, just like that. And I was like, wait, what just happened? What just happened? Up until that moment, I always believed that, potentially there was something more. Because I'd read and hoped, and you go to church, there's always something more. But in that moment, I knew there was something more because I just went there. Wherever there was, I just experienced it. So I became fascinated. Where did I just go? What just happened? What just happened? So I found myself drawn to quantum physics. I was at a bookstore one day, and a friend of mine said, hey, you listen to this teacher, he's a good teacher, and I bought a CD. And I started listening to quantum theory. And I was like, wow, this is very fascinating. I learned about a school that was teaching this in Seattle. Next thing you know, 9 months after this breakup with the guy, I ended up in Seattle studying quantum physics for 3 years.
What was the name of the school?
The school was the School of Enlightenment. Very non-traditional school, a very controversial school. But it was a school in which we learned how to master our minds. They would teach mastery of the mind. They would teach bilocation. They would blindfold us and teach us how to shoot archery with blindfolds. They would have us sitting in candle focus and meditation for hours. I mean, it was really intense. It was very intense, working with your mind, working to hone your focus, and quantum theory. So we were getting lectures, receiving lectures from physicists from all over the world. They had an amazing staff of very competent physicists. from some of the best schools in the country that were teaching. And it was an amazing, life-changing experience. 3 years.
So you moved to Seattle?
I was commuting back and forth because my daughter was here with her father. Yeah, it was really tough. It was tough because I was back and forth, and I was studying, and I would come home on break, and I'd go back and come back and study, and yeah. So it was a very challenging. I felt very torn geographically.
Sounds like a lot of work.
Yes.
How did you afford that?
Well, I had a job as a leasing representative, which I quit. And I ended up
apartment leases or
retail leasing.
Retail leasing.
So I actually was doing very well. I was in Brentwood working for a really big developer, and he had shopping malls, and I was his leasing girl. And I walked in one day, put my notice in. I pulled every dime I had ever saved in my life, and I sent it all towards supporting me and towards my schooling. Everything I had, I sold, down to my television. I sold everything I had, down to my bicycle. I just sold. I gave it everything, sold it all, gave it away, sold it, and I somehow sustained myself. I don't know how I did that. That is a miracle. That is a miracle. 3 years.
I don't understand something. You said you went back and forth. Did you live there at all?
I stayed on campus. They had a where you could stay on campus. So when I was there, I would stay on campus, but I kept my apartment here. So I lived between there and I lived between here.
And what was the focus for going to this school?
Right. My mother asked me the same question. I just said, I don't know. I fell in love with Einstein. I can't explain it.
Did it have something to do with that moment where you think you stepped somewhere else in the bathroom?
That drew a natural curiosity out of me to explore deeper the mysteries of the universe. And when I went to quantum physics, I felt like then I was starting to get closer to understanding the mysteries of the universe. So yes, that moment in the bathroom sparked in me great interest of there is something that lives beyond this physical realm. So what is that precisely? So that inspired within me. But then, as I've always been a seeker. I've always been a seeker. I've always wanted to know what's in those stars.
Do you have a definition for quantum mechanics?
So quantum mechanics, when I explain it to the people that I'm working with, is simply the world of the tiny quantum data, quantum particles, electrons, protons, neutrons. Every single thing that we see in our reality is comprised of these particles. So in essence, the world of the tiny, which is things beyond our perception to be able to range from an optical sense, comprises and creates the world of the large. So to understand what's happening on a mass scale, we have to go into the micro. So we go into quantum data, quantum mechanics, quantum theory.
After studying this, and I suspect somehow not only studying the theory of it and the mechanics of it and the equations of it, it's related somehow spiritually to whatever your life story happens to be. And it appears to me, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but there's reflection in there.
I found my attraction for quantum theory, my attraction was I came to understand that I am the observer. And that given that the world is going to be unfolding according to my observation. So what am I looking at? And what's the space I'm holding in my mind? Because, if I look at the day and I say it's going to be a really crappy day, I'm the observer, and as the observer, I have the power to collapse a quantum wave and make it so. And when I learned that I am collapsing quantum waves every day, creating my reality, I wanted more of that because I always felt so out of control in my life. I wanted to consciously begin my day knowing that my day is going to unfold according to the dominant attitude that I hold. If I wake up and say it's going to be crappy, and crappy it will be, because the world of the tiny reflects the world of the large. So I can put in my mind, this is going to be the best day of my life. And I'm going to meet wonderful people. And I'm going to get a wonderful little blessing. Maybe someone will buy me a drink, Maybe something wonderful will happen for me. But it all begins here. It all begins here. So once I learned that I could navigate through the world being a more conscious creator, then I began to understand that life is happening through me, not to me. Life was always happening to me. Oh my God, this happened, and this happened, and that happened. And I realized that wasn't the case. E equals MC squared, the greatest equation of all times, Albert Einstein. E equals MC squared. Energy and matter are one. So matter is just energy slowed down. We are simply energy, but we are appearing as matter. We are trapped light. We are frozen in space-time. And when I understood that, I knew I had power. What I'd been searching for my whole life was power, empowerment. To no longer be the victim, to be the victim of some man beating me or choking me or being abused. But now I could command my life simply by the thoughts that I held consistently. It's a practice because our thoughts, they can get the better of us.
When you're at the school, is this part of the curriculum, or is this something you came to on your own?
Well, it's part. It's something that's taught. It's something that physics at large teaches. But you don't have to go to the school to learn that. You could rent What the Bleep. You could read any book by Einstein. You could read any books on quantum theory, on quantum mechanics. Brian Greene and the Elegant Universe, and Max Planck, the founding father. So there's so many different places of resources that you could hear basically the same thing. Or people more commonly now call it the law of attraction. That's a big thing. The secret. The secret. The secret empower people because they realize that their point of focus attracted people, places, things, times, and events. What I put my focus upon expands. If I speak of illness, sick I will be. If I speak of lack and poverty, broke I will be. If you ever notice when you sit down and talk to somebody, listen to what they say. 5 minutes, and then you'll know what they're living. Because we are living the essence of what we are saying. Our life is no more and no less than what we ultimately say it is.
Are you in the same classes with the same people for 3 years?
Yeah, I see a lot of the people over and over and over. Their terms, their sessions. So people come from all over the world. They were in 7 different languages. They had 7 different interpreters. I met some of the same people over and over and over. There are not individual classes, although when we were doing disciplines, we were broken up into groups. But, we're 1,000 in an auditorium. And we sleep there, we eat there, we shower there. I advanced very quickly in the school, so I went to something called Blue College, which means when you go to Blue College, you're at an elevated study pattern, so it's very difficult. You have to bring a tent. You don't get to sleep in the auditorium. They have you come in February, the coldest month of the year. You're going to spend like a month with the master teacher. You bring a tent, you pitch a tent. It's 8 degrees, you're in the snow, you're outside. You work it out. Part of the school was about mastery. Mastery of what, you ask? Well, I'm glad you asked. Mastery of the self. Because we don't want to be uncomfortable. We don't want to be hot. We don't want to be tired. We don't want to be thirsty. And because we always give so much into our body consciousness, we were being taught and trained how to override it. Similar to military training, right? They have to teach military personnel, if you're out at war, you can't worry about sleeping in a ditch or being uncomfortable or what you're going to eat or your body, right? They have to train them to rise above. So we were training how to rise above our body. We were taught we had to master our bladder. When the master teacher would come down, if he lectured for 7 hours, you were not supposed to get him to go to the bathroom. You could, but there was almost like a public shame about it because you were being taught to master your bladder. That meant, be wise. Don't drink liquids 5 hours before he comes down. Go to the bathroom right before he starts teaching. But it was part of our mastery, being able to master ourselves. The school was intense. I said it was controversial because of that, because it wasn't comfortable. It wasn't meant to be comfortable. I would go there thinking I was cute, get off the plane. I would look like just holy hell by the time the sessions were over. I learned how to be at peace, sleeping outside in the snow. I learned how to pitch a tent, something I had never done when I was growing up. When we were in our strictest of disciplines, we could eat what we could hold in our hand. whatever you can hold in your hand, because it wasn't about an excess. You know, we do everything to an excess. We want to eat till we get sleepy and fall asleep. So we had very disciplined. We were under strict discipline. Well, I didn't graduate. I did it 3 years, and I was signed up for another session. And ironically, on the day that I was supposed to go back for my next session, I was invited to speak. I was at the gym, and a man came up to me here in LA and asked me to come and speak to a group of women in Alhambra. And I went because I needed the money. I went to speak. And they loved what I had to say. They invited me back. They started inviting me back every week. So I was being offered opportunities to go and make money, which I desperately needed, and to teach. And I had to have something to teach. So I created a curriculum. And that's where Journey to Worthy began. Journey to Worthy began as an opportunity to teach and inspire women who were depressed and feeling stuck in their life. And I was supposed to go back to school, but I found myself oddly now in the role of teacher. And from there, Journey to Worthy and I never went back to school. And I knew that at that point, there was a changing in my life, a transition, where I was being called upon to go from student to teacher. And that's what I did.
Did you immediately come up with the name?
You know, it's so interesting. I wish I could remember exactly when I came up with the name. One day the name just spoke, and then the name, it's like it always was. It's always been. I can't tell you precisely where it came from, but I can tell you what it means. Journey to Worthy, as I was sharing with Rich, you know, we always clock the miles when we're traveling. You know, if we're making long trips, we always count our layover time, or how many hours are going to be in the air, et cetera, et cetera. And I realized one day I was sitting down and I said, what's the longest trip I've ever taken? And I said, oh, that's easy. The journey to my own worthiness, to love myself. That's the longest trip I've ever taken. The journey to worthy. So that became the foundation and the cornerstone of my life's work.
So what is the process of Journey to Worthy?
Journey to Worthy, the process of it, I mean, that's it. I don't know if it's a process. Journey to Worthy, by definition, is a global movement of inspiration. It's a movement. It is translated through lectures, workshops, classes, private sessions, healing retreats, one-on-ones. So that's like, you know, Journey to Worthy is the umbrella, and all of the things that I do underneath it, you know, the divisions of Journey to Worthy, where it's healing retreats and workshops. I work with nonprofits, I work with corporate America, I work with schools. I've lectured at Compton High School, everything from Compton to Pacific Palisades. I do sessions on Skype. I have clients in the Middle East. I work with people in Dubai. I work with people across the East. I work with people all over the world. And who are the people that I work with are the people that are finding themselves living lives that they want to transcend, rise above patterns, pain, crises, transitions, sadness. In the human experience, we're all going to fall into a bit of challenge from time to time. Whether that's with our business, whether that's with our relationship, whether that's with our health. We all have a moment. We all have a moment. It's coming for all of us. You can't live here and not have a moment. That moment where you have to pull up on the reservoir of everything that you are to just get to that next moment. Some people may have an easier path than others, but everybody will have a moment in which they will have to really pull it out. You know, maybe you wake up one day and your spouse of 30 years is killed in a car accident. Well, that changes your life. That's your moment. And in that moment, you're gonna have to rise above. You're gonna have to become who you've never been before. We all have a moment. We all have a moment that we have to meet where we are going to have to be more than we have ever been before. People in that position, they find me. They don't always have to have trauma, but I do work with a lot of trauma. I work with sexual abuse. I work with addicts, of course, from every different level, alcohol, drugs. I work with people who have been in 30-year marriages and just aren't happy, you know. I work with very wealthy clients. I work with celebrity clients. I work with athletes, people who have everything and yet nothing at all. What I found the most fascinating to me is that some of the wealthiest people in the world are some of the poorest people I've ever met. because they have everything and they cannot buy themselves a good night of sleep. And those people will come to my humble abode and sit on my couch and engage me because they're looking for something that they can't buy with money.
Well, and somebody like that, or anybody really, how many sessions, I mean, does it take, I would think it would take more than one session to really get to the core.
You know, I have people that I've worked with for years that still come, because it's a community. Journey to Worthy is a community. So someone could come through for one class. I did a class this Sunday on free will versus predestination. That was the topic. Fascinating class. Some people will come one time.
And how many people are in a class?
It could be anywhere from 30 to 40 to 10. Yeah. I do healing retreats. I do them 2 to 3 times a year. I have 15 people coming from all over the world. We'll be going on May 19th to Mount Shasta. So that's one of the things that I do. And I work one-on-one with people. But yes, everyone will come. Again, some people will stay for a long time, some people will stay for a short time. It depends on what they're needing and what they feel that they're getting out of it.
Is there a discipline that you teach with this? Is there a process that's involved?
Not in the way that you would think of it. Not in the way that you would, that it could be structured. This is what we do. No, it's a very free, open format. There's no regimented, this is what we do. When I meet with someone, I feel their energy. I'm very energy sensitive. I can feel, I can see. I can see people's patterns even if they don't say it. I can hear what people don't say. I can hear it. So, and if someone starts speaking to me, I have a gift for being able to see immediately, what it is. It's like a great hairstylist. They can look at your hair and immediately tell what needs to be done, right? And I'm very much the same way I'm working with people. I can just sit with them 5 minutes and I'll know exactly where they're losing energy, where they're leaking energy. And I have the ability to explain it in a way where they've never quite heard it that way before, because always I bring everything back to E equals MC squared. I'm always talking about energy and matter. So a lot of my work focuses on just as much the non-physical as the physical. So I'm not just dealing with what's out here, I'm going what's behind the scene.
You have an intuitive sense of what's going on with people, and you've matched that with the quantum physics, mechanics.
Yeah.
That's a strange hybrid.
Yeah, it's neuroscience, quantum physics. It's quantum physics, neuroscience, and spirituality all combined into one. Really, science and spirituality really, to me, should be compatible, because science only validates the beauty and the mystery of the unknown if we really look at it and what physics is showing and teaching us. And I have another component, though, that I don't, that only a select few of my people will experience with me. And that's the part of me that travels, and I do travel. And I know that you may not have a frame of reference what I'm about to say, but I'm going to say it anyway. 2006, I got up to go to the bathroom one night. No big deal, right? We do it all the time. However, this particular night, my body did not follow me. My body stayed on the couch. And I thought I died. So from that moment, I walked into another dimension. And I was so fascinated with that, I came back to my body. I was like, what the?
Twice in your life.
Yeah, but it gets deeper, because I came back, I was fascinated, and I said, what was that? I began studying spontaneous out-of-body experiences. Robert Monroe, who's the father of the Monroe Institute, he was the master of out-of-body experiences. He has a whole institution back on the East Coast dedicated to the study of the out-of-body experience. So I figured if I did it once, I can do it again. I spent 1 year of my life practicing every day for 2 hours. I'd wrap myself in a blanket, in a cocoon. I'd make myself in a cocoon, and I would practice leaving my body at will, at command. Within 1 year, I got so good at it, I could lay down in the fetal position, and within 3 minutes, I could be out of my body. So from there, why would I do that? Because I was fascinated. I always said I wanted to know what lives beyond the stars. I would go into other dimensions. I would talk to other beings, and yes, there are other beings. We are not alone. I would go to other planets, other star systems. Consciousness, you see, is the final frontier, because you have to wonder, when someone dies, where are they? Where's that light? What makes you you? And when you lay your body down and everybody comes and they look at your body, they're looking for the spark that was behind your eyes, the sheen of life, that thing that made you uniquely you. There's a body, but if you see a body without a spirit, you'll recognize how lifeless it looks, like a doll, right? So where did they go? And that's been the big debate. Where do they go? So I wanted to know ahead of time.
Where do they go? Or do they go? Was my
Yeah,
my
absolutely.
question,
Yeah, absolutely they go. Near-death experiences. Raymond Moody in the 70s wrote a book, Life After Life. And he began this profound exploration of the near-death experience where people will talk about having surgery and coming out of their bodies and being able to hear conversations down the hall. And they will be able to provide profound accuracy of things that there's no way someone in their condition would know. Many of them having been declared clinically dead. So that is an ongoing, and millions of people are coming forward now saying, hey, I've had an experience. You know, this was poo-pooed back in the 70s. Nobody wanted to hear about this. But now more and more people are understanding that, again, I say consciousness is the final frontier because consciousness is what we are. You know, everyone thinks, is it just the brain? Does consciousness exist once the brain dies? That's ultimately the question. Do we go on after the brain ceases operation? And the answer, I'm 100% sure, of course we do. The brain is an interface that consciousness uses to interact in this dimension. It's just an interface. That's all it is.
I like that.
So where does that consciousness go?
That consciousness goes to, now we're talking the laws of physics, right? Like attracts like attracts like. It goes to the dimension that it is most compatible with. So in other words, there is no grandfather. You're not grandfathered into enlightenment. When you die, you don't get to be all seeing, all knowing, all doing. You basically go on. It's a continuation in your journey. So you will go to the plane of existence that is most compatible to where you left off in your life. Simply put, you go to where you are. We don't attract what we want. We attract what we are. Even in partnerships and in the non-physical, we don't attract what we want. We attract what we are. Because like attracts like attracts like. It's one of the laws of the universe.
But what we are, is that defined by us, or is that defined by wherever? So if our brain is an interface between the physical now and the dimension later, did that dimension later exist before the physical now? And who we are, was that defined in the dimension before?
Well, okay, so it gets tricky because Einstein and Edison both established time is only an illusion. So when we say before, after, we're just dealing with illusory terms. So everything is now. Imagine, if you will, a stack of papers, 1, 2, 3. They all exist now, but the top paper could be future, the middle paper could be present, and the bottom could be called the past. So we're simply creating, in the brain, we have to have a linear point of reference. Otherwise, we couldn't make sense if everything happens now. Right? So if it happened now, this interview already happened, but wait, it's happening now. But wait, this morning it already happened, but wait, this evening it'll be in the past. So how do we keep it all straight? The brain creates a linear timeline that we can process this time-space reality. So we are light, slowed down, to form matter. We are trapped light, we are frozen light, but nonetheless we are still light, slowed down, frozen in space-time. We were before we were in these bodies, and of course we will be after these. But these bodies are a temporary vehicle that we're occupying. That your body and my body vibrates at the same resonance of everything on the earth. Otherwise, we couldn't touch it. If you weren't vibrating at the same resonance of that chair, you'd fall through it. If I weren't vibrating the same resonance of this couch, I couldn't occupy it. I could not touch you and feel you if you were not vibrating at the same rate of frequency as I. Now, when you transition, meaning you drop the physical body, your vibration naturally ascends to a higher vibration. So your loved one could be standing right beside you and they go to touch you and their arms pass through you. Why? Because you're vibrating at different frequencies. So we always are. We never were not. Now, when you say we or us or I always ask the question, who's doing the asking? Because we believe ourselves to be this personality, which is just the conditioned beliefs and emotions, the experiences that we've had, what we've been taught. We all running our belief systems through our beautiful brains, right? We take this collection of experiences and we call it I. Who is Rich? Who is Patrick? Who are you really? Well, I was born, I'm the son of, I had a job, I have a family, I'm Jewish, I'm Caucasian, I'm 50, I'm 40. We have all these definitions. But so what you have to understand, when you're passing through the death experience, you're going to let go of your religion. You're not going to take it with you. Sorry. You're going to let go of your financial condition. Sorry. None of that's going with you. That's all going to be here for people to fight over that's left behind. You're not going to take your most treasured objects, the things that you love. Those things aren't coming with you. When you lay down and take your last breath, the only thing coming with you is you. But who is the you that I'm talking about? That's the person that we struggle to meet in this life because we are so defined by everything outside of us. Who would I be if I weren't a black woman? If I weren't a mom, a daughter, a sister, a lover, a writer, a speaker, a teacher? Who am I? Well, guess what? One day I'm going to find out because I'm going to leave all those things behind. Right? So I always ask people to use a word, use a little bit of caution when trying to understand who the I is that they're speaking of. I always say, who's really asking the question? The personality self? Well, the personality self as we know it, that's going to the grave. The I. But the real I, meaning just consciousness itself, pure awareness, that was before, is now, and will always be. That eternal spark that you are, that will never be extinguished. Because energy, your energy, right? Energy cannot be created or destroyed. That's fact. It can only be transferred, transmuted, transitioned. If you take a drop of water and you evaporate it, it will still measure exactly the drop if you measure it. If you take snow and evaporate it and it goes up, everything is a cycle, right? And it always weighs the same. It just changes form, whether it's a block of ice, whether it's snow that melts or a glass of water. It's just form. So we're form. We are consciousness temporarily occupying this vehicle. It's like all the cars driving down the freeway. Imagine when a car stops on the freeway. We see it sometimes. People have a breakdown. We never confuse the person with the car because we know the person will get out of the car. We don't look at the car and go, oh my God, they're dead. We understand that they've gotten out of the car. We don't confuse them for the car. But when we go to funerals, oh my God, they're dead, right? We confuse them. They're not dead. They're out of the car. They've gotten out of the car. And one day we're all going to get out of the car. Death, I respect death. Why? Because death has been my greatest teacher. Death has my undivided attention because it has come for people that I've loved. And best thing I ever heard, woman goes to a hospice care worker, right? And she gets this job and she's excited to have it. And she's develops this relationship with this woman who's days away from dying. And she says, can I ask you something? She's asking very meekly. And the woman who's dying looks at her and says, yes. She said, will you tell me what it feels like to know that you're dying? And the woman looked at her and she said, can I ask you something? And she's like, yes. Can you tell me what it feels like to pretend that you're not? Aren't we all just pretending? We're just pretending. Because everybody has a day. My life's work and the work that I do with myself every day is to ask myself, not how do I want to die per se, what will be my life beyond this moment, but really, how do I want to live? How do I want to live? And every day matters, every day counts, that I'm in this human body, that I get to touch someone's life, influence someone, inspire someone. It's a privilege to be here, to have a body. I have a body, which means I'm vibrating at the same frequency as you. It means I can reach out and touch you. You can hear me because you are within the range of the frequency of my voice. That's a blessing. That's a gift.
It's quite the journey to listen.
It
Quite the
is.
journey, quite the experience,
It
quite the
is.
accumulation of knowledge. Do you share this with your family?
My family is of a very different mindset. A lot of them are still very much in church. My parents go to church. My sisters have found themselves outside of the church, really just free thinkers on their own. My family looks at me as being a bit odd. I'm a bit different. So I don't share a like-minded consideration with we're very different. They just love me and accept me as who I am. But we don't have deep spiritual dialogue and conversation, no. I do with my cat though. He travels with me.
Family, cat's family.
Cat is family.
As long as
Yeah.
the cat's around.
Yes.
I remember my family's from back east, and they would say, "Oh, Richard went to California to find himself."
Oh.
I didn't know I was lost. Do you think that that's the way they deal with you?
I think that they're very polite. I think they politely overlook all the things they don't understand. I think that they're very proud of me. I mean, they've been to a Journey to Worthy event. One of the most memorable experiences of my life was about 4 years ago when my dad came to a Journey to Worthy event that I held in an auditorium in Phoenix, and I had passed out packages because we have workshops, and my dad has I think he went to maybe 7th grade, maybe. But to see my dad with his folder trying to understand the deeper things of quantum physics was actually priceless. And I really saw him struggling, trying to understand. And I definitely think that my family is proud. I definitely feel they're proud. I don't think they fully understand what I do, but they see its impact. That's what they're most proud of. They've been to events where I've had people come and speak and talk to them about how my work has changed their life. So they see the effect that my work is having in the world, and they honor that more than they honor, well, they don't know what I'm doing, but they know something's happening, and that people are saying it's touched them, it's made a difference, it changed their life, it's helped them on their journey. Some people have said it saved their life. There's just varying different feedback. I always say I'm just a humble servant, and I'm still on the journey, very much learning. I'm always going to be a student. I think I'm an excellent student, which makes me a pretty good teacher because first and foremost, I am a student. I'm still asking questions. I'm always going to ask questions. Bigger and bigger and bigger questions. Because I've always wanted to know. I just recently came back. I want to add this. I went to Peru. I spent some time in the Amazon jungle studying with a shaman. That was a beyond life-changing experience. I participated in several ayahuasca ceremonies. I always say ayahuasca, if you don't know what that is, it's a very strong plant medicine. I think there's a lot of misconceptions around it. I don't call it a psychedelic. It seems hardly what it is. To me, ayahuasca is a divine spirit that lives in the non-physical, that utilizes the vine. The vine and the chacruna plant, when mixed together, create a brew of tea. It's probably one of the most horrific things you'll ever put in your mouth to drink. And it elicits an automatic gag reflex. It's so strong. And now I'm a girl who's never smoked pot. I've never even tasted coffee. So I've never had any form of mind-altering substance in my body. I've never been drunk. I've never participated in any part of life in that aspect. So I went down and I participated in the strongest plant medicine in the world. It was mind-bending. I had, I just to even try to translate it into language is an impossibility. But I will tell you this, I saw the past and I saw the future. I walked through dimensions, literally. 16 hours on my back, incapacitated under the effects of ayahuasca, 3 days in a row. I lost about 10 pounds in a week. It's a very exacting medicine. It's a true serum. Ayahuasca is a true serum because you're going to see yourself. It will show you yourself. It will open your subconscious mind and it will deliver to you whatever you are. Whether it's good, bad, ugly, indifferent, whatever, it will show you. It will show you the places where you have dishonored yourself. If you had any good common sense, you'd be terrified to do it because it's a very exacting medicine. But I believe it is one of the purest forms of healing that we have in the world. I encourage, not everybody's able to do it. There are, if you have heart problems, high blood pressure and all of that, it's very exacting medicine. It can potentially be very difficult to work with because of the purgative effects, the vomiting. I've never thrown up so much in all of my life. But the after effect and the clarity and the healing of the plant medicine is life-changing, I believe.
How does that take you forward?
That takes me...
You came back.
I came forward. I came back.
You take all this in.
Because I had to meet myself in ways I had not. I feel that I had a death experience that you only have the time of death. I literally thought I was going to die. And then there was a point where I just prayed that I would, because death would have been easier than what I was going through. I came back open. Ayahuasca broke my heart wide open. I mean, I was in culture shock, landing in the jungle, traveling down the Amazon, watching small children wash their families' clothing in the dirty, muddy water of the Amazon. I saw poverty that we just don't have here like that. It was culture shock. It was disturbing. It was heartbreaking. And then there was a part of me that went into the jungle and fell in love with the jungle. And when I came back to Los Angeles, I went through a reverse culture shock, because I landed at LAX and the first thing I see is the man in the Porsche with the speakerphone and the Rolex, and I just started crying. Why did I cry? Because I felt like we live in such a wealthy city and we're so poor. And I could feel it. The noise in the city, and not just the sound, the audible sound, but the noise of our value system. The things that we make so important, what kind of car we drive, what kind of house we have. We live to impress people because we feel so worthless. You know, I've always said luxury brands, Prada, Gucci, Mercedes, Rolls-Royce, Bentley, they'll always have an audience. You know why? Because human beings feel worthless. And they will always reach for something outside of themselves to elevate their status. And as long as that condition exists, they will never need to advertise. They'll always have an audience. Because we attach to things to make ourselves feel better about ourselves. And when I came back, landed down in LA, I felt that in a way I'd never felt it before. I felt I had left such a wealthy, affluent area and gone to such an impoverished land, and I wept for that. I wept for those people. And then when I came back, shockingly, I wept for the people in the affluent land. Because, you know, we are in a time, to me, humbly, I do feel like we are in a time where we really have to wake up. We got to wake up. We are the most addicted society in human history. We are excessive in every sense of the word. We drink too much. We spend too much. We eat too much. We sex too much. We gamble too much. We're in excess. And let me tell you, 1 million people a year, the United Nations, 1 million people a year, they have on record committing suicide. That's a lot of people that just can't do it anymore. The depression, we're at an all-time high for depression, antidepressant, antipsychotic medication, anti-anxiety medication. We're medicated. Our medical system is failing to treat chronic illness. Our psyche, we can't hold, there's no walls to hold all the mental illness. Now you just see them running around as homeless now, a lot. So our society is crumbling in the West, and that's why so many people are now turning to alternatives such as ayahuasca. They're trying to go to the Amazon for some healing. And you know what? Run, don't walk. And I just feel like I'm an advocate for it after having the experience. I'll be going back in June to continue working with the shaman. I came back, it made me a better teacher, it made me a better human, it made me a better servant, it made me a better everything. I always say that I'm a walking miracle. I told you just a part of my story in the beginning of where I've come from. The person that I am now, first and foremost, I did not think I would live to be this. I'm 51. I thought I'd be dead by now, for sure. I was traveling down a path of complete annihilation. So the fact that not only am I still here, but I'm helping people by the hordes, that's amazing. I am the miracle that I teach. And if anything, I feel like my life is the testimony of all that I believe in. My life, from what I was to who I am. And if you knew me back then, you would really know what a miracle I am now. You really would.
Well, we got a sense of it. I'd like to thank you. Richard'd like to thank you
Thank
for
you.
sharing your story with us.
Thank you.
'Cause it was miraculous for us to be here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And we hope everybody else enjoys it just like we did.
Thank you.
Ta-ta-ta-ta-ta. Tell me who you loved. Tell me who loved you. Yeah.